Is the person next to you really who they seem? Or maybe they're just a copy, a doppelganger, a chameleon if you will. Maybe the real person you once knew has been shrunk and placed inside a drawer, or perhaps they're being stored in a cupboard or a car. Series 4 of classic Doctor Who had a lot of firsts. There was a first brand new Doctor. There was the first appearance of an iconic villain in the form of Cybermen. There was a first fresh lick of paint for those Cybermen. There was a first new companion. There was a first new title sequence. And there was, in general, just a fresh lick of paint for the great institution of Doctor Who. The Highlanders was the last historical adventure that viewers would see for a very long time, and going forward the series would focus more on science fiction driven adventures. Unfortunately, like Series 5 and Series 3 before it, Season 4 fell victim to the intense scrapping and destruction of Doctor Who episodes throughout the 60s and 70s. That means that this particular story, like so many others, only exists in partial form. Curse you, BBC! I am of course talking about 1967's The Faceless Ones. And thank you very much to Tim A. Wing for requesting this story over on Patreon. Head over to patreon.com/chosenchimp and you can become a distinguished follower for just £1 a month. It is there that you can request your Doctor Who topic for coverage. Your name will be mentioned in the video and your contribution will go towards making this channel a bigger, smarter, stronger, brighter, better smelling place to be for us lovers of Doctor Who. Fun fact, this adventure is the first time that the Doctor had returned to what was then present-day Earth since the War Machines one season before. They had been all around the block, planet Earth in the future and the past, unknown time zones, and other fantastic worlds, and it's only fitting that they land here on the same day that they left. And they just so happen to land in Gatwick Airport, or more specifically a runway in Gatwick Airport. And it is actually legitimately Gatwick Airport. This story was filmed at Gatwick Airport, and you've got loads of stock footage of planes taking off and all the relevant audio to really bring this setting to life, and it works extremely well, or at least what you can actually see of it. The Doctor, Jamie, Polly and Ben land not just in Gatwick Airport, but in one of the runways, which is a very dangerous place to be. Naturally, Jamie sees the planes flying overhead and thinks immediately that they are flying beasties. And why wouldn't you? In this opening scene, we also learn something about the Second Doctor that we didn't know before, and that is when the Second Doctor sees the police, he says, "Scatter!" Ben immediately falls over. So begins a caper of shenanigans, mystery, deception, and sinister alien forces of the unknown variety. The Doctor's TARDIS immediately gets confiscated, meaning they are stranded in this location, and Polly, on entering a hangar, witnesses a murder. Two pilots belonging to the company of Chameleon Tours murder a detective inspector with a strange laser gun. The fuddy-duddy commandant has a hard time digesting it all, what with this talk of murder, these strange stowaways, causing one of his colleagues to say this.
As a matter of fact, he's just going to look for a dead body. Yes, it's going to be one of those days, isn't it?
Yeah, you're saying that like it's a regular occurrence, mate. So the Doctor and Jamie go to investigate the body along with Polly, and the Doctor deduces that this man has somehow been electrocuted. At the end of this episode, you find out that the decidedly dodgy pilots of Captain Blade and his colleague Spencer are not only not what they seem, but they also have company. They guide somebody or something down the stairs, take them to the nurse's room and sit them on the bed, at which point you see this. That definitely would have freaked me out as a child. So, end of part 1, and if you want to see more of that, you got to skip to part 3. because part 2 doesn't exist and neither does part 4, 5 or 6. But there are other ways that you can enjoy this story. For example, you can listen to the whole audio on the Lost Adventures box set, or you can have a good butchers at the numerous telesnaps which do survive of this story, or you can watch the 2020 animation. I do have a great deal of love for this animation, like so many of the others, and it's the first way that I actually watched the Faceless ones. You can see this in both a black and white version and a colour version, and brings the original story to life with an impressive level of authenticity, especially when you splice it with the original live action episodes. But it also adds some fun new features. It's got a great deal of Easter eggs, callbacks to other Doctor Who episodes of that era, and a few additional nods as well. However, for the everyday Doctor Who fan, or at least for me, it does come with a certain level of longing to see what those original pieces must have looked like. I mean, especially in the later episodes of this one, when you get all the satellite shots and all the plane shots, the telesnaps fill in those mental gaps for you to an extent, but it would have been great to see these original things that is depicted in photos and in animations, and maybe one day they will be found and restored somehow, but in the meantime we just gotta dream, and dream we do. Anyway, the chameleon process is as follows. They take the original, they strap a gizmo to their arm, then they take the chameleon subject and they strap a similar looking gizmo to the chameleon subject's arm, and then the chameleon subject gradually morphs into an exact copy of the original, down to voice and memory as well. Nurse Pinto will run a quick quiz to make sure that they are fully on board and they are a working, serviceable copy, at which point they infiltrate the ranks of the airport. Chameleon tours by name, chameleon tours by nature. Their branding isn't exactly subtle. Like Dalek holidays and Cybermen coach trips, Chameleon Tours is actually a front for something a great deal more sinister. On the surface, it advertises itself as an opportunity for young people to travel across the world and visit different countries. But these young people never actually reach their destinations. In fact, they disappear altogether. Cue the young go-getting Liverpudlian Samantha Briggs, a character who was originally pitched to be a long-running companion before Victoria came along. She buddies up with Jamie McCrimmon in pursuit of her missing brother Ryan, and her and Jamie kind of hit it off in a sort of smitten kind of way, which is cute and is almost the running gag throughout this story. Also on the case is Detective Inspector Crossland, who is investigating the disappearance of his colleague who we saw murdered at the beginning of this story. Meanwhile, Spencer and Blade are getting pretty sick of the meddling antics of the Doctor, who appears to be getting ever closer to the bottom of this mystery. They decide to kill him in the most sensible way possible, by trapping him in a room and freezing him to death. Which they almost do, but the second Doctor is a smart one, you see. He plays possum and dispatches one of the chameleon pilots using the very laser that they use to dispatch other people. Very smooth indeed. It is at this point that the Doctor makes a desperate plea to the Commandant, who in his own right is unfortunately a bit of a proto-chin. He gets around to it in the end, but for the first half of this story he is being exhausting with his denial that anything alien is going on. You're in an episode of Doctor Who, mate. Get with the programme. The Doctor also attempts to unmask one of the inside chameleon operatives by using the laser to...
Oh, perhaps you've seen one of these before.
No.
breaking his cup. Didn't see it coming. Meanwhile, Chameleon Polly not only refutes the idea that she was ever friends with the Doctor, but she also refutes the idea that she was ever even Polly. She claims to be someone called Misha, and this front makes it ever more difficult for the good guys to penetrate the inner workings of the Chameleon scheme, but they get round to it in the end. Episode 3 ends with Detective Inspector Crossland boarding one of the Chameleon tour planes, at which point Captain Blade goes full mask-off alien villain. He's not even hiding who he is anymore, nor is he hiding the intentions of his species. The DI can only watch in horror as the young passengers of this plane suddenly vanish. Where the dickens did they go, and more to the point, where does he go? Now, this whole doppelganger thing, the Faceless Ones, is by no means the first example in science fiction. One of the most famous examples of science fiction doppelganger storytelling is, of course, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. The original Invasion of the Body Snatchers film was made in 1956 and was adapted from a book written in 1954 titled The Body Snatchers. The original Invasion of the Body Snatchers movie, which had existed for a decade by the time that the Faceless Ones was made, was famous for being extremely symbolic of the communist Cold War paranoia that ran rife through so many American science fiction movies of that era. The symbolism is easy to spot once you pay attention and is very well documented. However, there's no such symbolism or allegories in the Faceless Ones at all, and I'm not talking specifically about Cold War allegories, I'm talking about metaphors of any kind at all. You know, as soon as doppelgangers come into the fray, you have a golden opportunity to cover themes of mistrust and paranoia and anxiety of various forms. You can adapt this into many ways that you can. Another famous example is the short story Who Goes There? This was originally made into a movie called The Thing from Another World, which again was an allegory for communist paranoia. But it was then made into a 1982 horror film by John Carpenter, where it was simply about trust and people not being who they seemed. It wasn't really a metaphor for war of any kind, it was more just a simple story of, is the person next to you really who they seem? And I can't help thinking that the Faceless Ones in itself kind of dropped the ball on this opportunity. At no point does it cover any themes of mistrust, and the biggest way that it kind of lets its own premise down is the fact that there's no really any point where the audience are tricked. With the sort of exception of Polly, I suppose, who is obviously not who they seem anyway, at no point in this story does it even attempt to dupe the audience into thinking that the person they are looking at is the regular human, whereas actually, shock horror, they were a chameleon all along. Instead, every time this happens, we are let in on the process from the word go. We see the chameleon copying the person, and therefore it's only fooling characters in the show, not us the viewer. And surely that is a big old clanger. Again, regarding other things that involve doppelgangers in film and TV, I also remembered that when I was younger, British telly showing episodes of The Invaders, a Quinn Martin production, a US TV show which really tapped in diligently to the aliens disguising themselves as humans theme. And I was interested to discover that that series was originally transmitted in 1967, the same year that The Faceless Ones was also broadcast. So The Faceless Ones has no true tangible mystery because you see pretty much everything from the aliens' perspective. But what it does have is lasers like in Goldfinger. The Doctor and Jamie and Samantha end up lying on the ground paralysed, but Samantha can move her arm so she can use her mirror to deflect the laser to destroy the machine. Classy. And you've also got RAF fighter jets being blown up by alien guns. So what it lacks in substance, it makes up for in action and fun. And the last couple of episodes is where the excitement really ramps up. And again, it is such a damn shame that we don't have these anymore. Once the planes get into the middle of their journey, they disappear, not by going down into the ocean as many people would suspect, but instead flying up completely vertically into space where they board a giant satellite, an object the homage of which has been paid to excellently in the animation, but you can also see one or two telesnaps of what it originally looked like. Worth noting also that by this point the production team were pretty sick of working with Shawcraft Productions, who had been making models for Doctor Who since the Daleks. Apparently doors didn't work and things broke and all kinds of stuff. But again, there are certain interiors and creations that from the telesnaps look pretty cool. The first one of which is when you go into the plane's cockpit. Everything else in the plane looks regular and normal, but when the characters go into the cockpit, nothing but alien controls. I love it. I love the whole aesthetics of these spaceships, the bare minimum of which you see. You at least get a window looking out into space, which, as I've said before, is great because nothing beats small exteriors looking out into larger spaces. It just creates a sense of depth and perspective. I like the fact that this is a story that starts off in Gatwick Airport and then ends up in outer space. That is a great progression. Very smooth, very simple, and very linear. This must have been a really fun Doctor Who to watch as a kid. So heading the chameleon operation isn't Captain Blade, but the director, who in the meantime has disguised himself as Detective Inspector Crossland, sans glasses. It is then that the director explains to the Doctor that the chameleons had a big catastrophe on their planet. They have lost their identities and they are dying out, and their plan is to abduct no less than 50,000 humans so they can copy them and presumably survive doing that. Anyway, say what you like about their ideas, they did have a very good filing system. Look at them all tucked away in those little drawers. This means that their cause isn't entirely without sympathy, and it allows the Doctor some wriggle room to negotiate with this civilization from one intelligent being to the next. There is also some dissension within the ranks as the Doctor gets the upper hand with these chameleon folk. Having finally brought the Commandant around to this alien infiltration, the Doctor figures out that certain chameleon subjects can have their links broken with the original from a certain distance, which means he is able to essentially blackmail people like Spencer and Blade. Having boarded the satellite, the Doctor instantly realises that Jamie is in fact a chameleon because he's not even speaking in his native Scottish accent. And the audience knew that already because we saw the whole process from the beginning, so that was set up to deceive precisely nobody. What I find interesting about the Doctor in this final act is his very subtle blend of characteristics. You've got this undercurrent of passive aggressiveness and this, obvious sense of empathy. He understands completely the plight of these alien creatures, but he has no hang-ups in pretty much obliterating them if they continue to harm the people of Earth. It allows him to hit the negotiating table with a level of firmness which is kind of uncharacteristic of Patrick Troughton's Doctor. He is a Doctor known actually for his brashness, for his impulsive, anxious, jittery nature, but here he is cool as a cucumber, and it allows the chameleons to step back and think about what they are doing. With the Doctor holding characters such as Spencer and Captain Blade to ransom, he allows the descent to run its own course. In the end, Captain Blade shoots the director because Captain Blade decides that to stop their plan and exile themselves with the Doctor's help is a much more viable option than continue this invasion when they are obviously going to lose. The director has none of it. He tries to run away. Spencer shoots him in the back. Threat neutralised, and that is it. And it ends with the Doctor saying this:
"So long as you keep your side of the bargain, you may return to your planet unharmed. Perhaps your scientist will be able to find some way out of their dilemma. I may be able to give them one or two ideas of my own."
I mean, this is one of those finales that's underwhelming in a sense. It's got a kind of blink and you'll miss it quality to the ending, but at the same time I find it interesting when you put it alongside later episodes when there's two races conflicting. For example, the Silurians and the human military in the John Pertwee stories, it was kind of different because the Silurians were just trying to claim their land back, but you still had these failed attempts of putting two races down to the negotiating table to create an amicable solution for both. Whereas in this one, the Doctor does it. He saves humanity. Gatwick Airport get all the young people and all the hostages back unscathed, and the aliens go away with the Doctor's help, and everyone's happy. But we also get to the heartbreaking bit as the Doctor says goodbye to Ben and Polly. This is their last adventure. They have landed on the same day that it began for them in the War Machines, and this, folks, is kind of the last link to the William Hartnell era, as they started in Hartnell's tenure and one of those rare sets of companions that exist through regeneration, something that you wouldn't see again until Sarah Jane Smith, way forward in the 70s. The Doctor says goodbye to Ben and Polly, and he is pretty sad to see them go. Anyway, that's the end of that. The Doctor and Jamie go to find their TARDIS, and then it's Evil of the Daleks. Nice, charming, sensible, nothing particularly special, nothing groundbreaking or amazing, but good quality Doctor Who fun. I like it, I've watched it quite a few times now, and I will probably watch it again at some point. I do like the faceless ones a lot indeed. And the more I think about the Chameleons themselves, the more I like the numerous strictures there were to how they could operate. They were kind of the underdogs of alien villains in a sense, and a few of the kind of B-list monsters of the black and white era were a little bit like that. Sensorites being another one that I've just plucked out of my head. By no means the super evil, sinister ways of Daleks and Cybermen. So yeah, faceless ones, very good. I like it. But what do you think of this story? Get in the comments and tell me what you thought of the faceless ones, and let me in on any observations you made that I might have missed. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and your viewership means a great deal. If you want to check me out on social media, then please visit my Blue Sky page at thechosenchimp.bsky.social. I hope you are all safe and well, and please, for the love of Pete and his world, have a good one.